Okay, looks like we're live. Hello there, everyone. It's Katie here from Abridge Academy. We're just getting everything set up. So if you're tuning in early, do feel free to just introduce yourself in the comments while we're getting everything started. And what's happening here? Something's gone weird in the chat. Oh, good. Okay, fantastic. So yeah, welcome to this webinar. I'm really excited to welcome Lauren from Copywriting, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about the plans of the webinar in a moment. But just as a quick intro, for anyone who's new here, my name's Katie. As I mentioned, from Abridge Academy, and we normally offer like curriculum and coaching and training for teachers who are teaching online, particularly independent teachers. And these webinars I've been doing as a way to invite guest speakers, experts like Lauren, who can teach us some really useful, helpful skills to help you grow your independent teaching business. So we're just getting everything started. If you're tuning in, that's the word. If you're tuning in early, do feel free to introduce yourself in the comments. Let us know that everything's working okay. Tell us where you're from, anything like that. It's great to know who's joining us. And I'm going to give it 1 minute or so just to make sure everything's working fine and check it is streaming correctly on Facebook and on YouTube. Let's have a look. It looks like it's working fine. We're seeing a few people joining us already. Do feel free to introduce yourself. Okay, we've got Clarence. Hello from Canada. Fantastic. Thank you for joining us. It must be quite early in the morning for you as well. So thank you for joining us. But living in Indonesia. There we go. More sensible time zone for our webinar today. Living in Indonesia for over 30 years. Fantastic. Great to have you join us. Thank you. But not too far from me. I'm in Japan if anyone's interested. So Indonesia, Japan, not too far away. It's always nice to have people joining us from vaguely the same area. Cool. Okay, I'm just going to check it's streaming on Facebook because I can see we've got comments from YouTube that sometimes it doesn't stream. Oh, it is working fine on Facebook as well. That's great. Okay, shall we get started then? So I'm just going to give a quick intro and welcome to our guest speaker. I'm sorry, this way. I've got the video mirrored. Okay, so our guest speaker, Lauren from Copywriting. And she is an expert. She's a former ESL tutor, and she's an expert on copywriting, which is all about writing content and writing things for your website or for your social media or anything really. She'll tell us more about this in a moment. I'm not the expert here. And she's going to teach us about how you can write content that actually converts and helps you find students, not just in China. I know many people focus on the Chinese market, but also from all around the world as well. So it's going to be really helpful. It doesn't matter which market you're targeting, doesn't matter which platforms you're using at the moment. I'm sure it's going to be really helpful. So shall I pass us straight over to Lauren? Do you want to give a more of a detailed introduction? Tell us a bit more about you and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As Katie just said, I'm Lauren and I'm a copywriter, which basically means that I write content and words for websites, email, social media, basically anything that is designed to sell language teachers courses or classes. So I am a total language nerd. I studied them throughout my degree and then moved to China where I started teaching ESL. I did that for a year before I ended up working kind of in the back office of an ESL company in the marketing team. I then moved on to a Chinese language school where I learned a lot about marketing and decided that I would specialize in copywriting. And then just over a year ago, I moved back to the UK and started my own business, which is something that I'd wanted to do for a long time and kind of naturally fell into education where, I'm helping language teachers, ESL teachers, French teachers, German teachers, basically teachers of any language, write content that converts. And that's exactly what I want to talk to you about today.
Awesome. I'm so excited to have you join us because what's quite unique, I think, is that you came from an ESL teaching background, but then you also have a genuine expertise in copywriting. So you can understand teachers and their businesses and what they're looking for and provide that expertise that many of us don't have as online teachers. No one really knows how to write this kind of content. People struggle a lot with marketing. It's one of the questions we get all the time. So I'm really excited for today's webinar. I feel like I'm going to learn so much as well. So thank you so much for joining us. I can just see a few more people tuning in. So I'm just going to quickly introduce who we've got joining us. We've got Nikki from South Africa, Verity from Indonesia, Pedro. Thanks for joining us, Pedro. Really appreciate your feedback. Glad you found the webinars helpful. Awesome. Greta from the US. mystery Facebook user from Canada. If your name isn't showing up on Wave Video, there's a link. If you're on Facebook, it works fine on YouTube, but if you're on Facebook, you have to authorize Wave Video to see your name. So there's a link above or below the video. I think it's above the video on YouTube, on Facebook, sorry, where you can authorize Wave Video to access your name and your picture so we can see who it is. You also, by the way, find some useful links in that video description, including links to Lauren's website, where you can find out more about her services and everything if you're interested as well.
So, yeah, a quick note on that. I had some tech issues last week. So my website's currently, the whole site isn't available, but the link to the free download is. So if you just go to the homepage, then you can download a workbook and it will be back up running again soon.
Fantastic. Yeah, we had a few people, I think, commenting on the Facebook page saying, oh, the link's not working, or I can't find something. But yes, the link should work for the free download, right?
Yes.
Which is great. Awesome. And if anyone's struggling to find it, just drop a reply to the email notifications or drop a message on Facebook, and I'm sure we'll get it to you as well. And I'll also, if you're on our email list, I'm going to send around an email later with another link to that too. Cool. Okay, we've got lots of people joining us here. A few more people. Bernadette from South Africa. Lisa, great to see you again, Lisa, from the US. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone. And thank you so much, Lauren, for joining us. I feel like it might be a great time now to jump in with your ideas and everything we've got to talk about. So Lauren's prepared a really great presentation talking about some tips and suggestions on copywriting and what copywriting actually is. So should I hand it to you, Lauren, to talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic.
Okay, yeah, so thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. So today's workshop is basically going to be about how to attract students from around the world and sell your services authentically using copywriting. So we are going to talk about, we're going to cover a quick introduction to what copywriting is and why you need it, some key channels that you might want to set up on, especially if you're moving away from the Chinese market or looking to broaden your focus. And then we'll cover 5 fundamental copywriting tips that you can literally implement right away. You can go away today and use them across all of the channels that we look at. Each one of these will come with some quick grammar action points, and then at the end we'll have a Q&A. If you have any questions about any specific platforms, then feel free to drop them in the comment box. I was just saying to Katie, I am a terrible multitasker. So if I don't reply to your questions in the box as we go, don't worry, we're going to stop at the end of kind of each section and I'll answer some questions then as well as at the end as well. So let's get stuck in. So what is copywriting? Copywriting is basically the science and the art of writing words that connect with a certain audience and persuade them to buy a product or service. It blends consumer psychology with creativity to form a message that speaks to one set of people, which is your target students. So the message that you write might work for some people, but not for others. And that is the sign of effective copy, because you shouldn't be writing generic messages that kind of target everyone. Effective copy will speak directly to the people you intend it to. It will earn their trust, build an engaged community, and eventually convert them into students. So one thing I've found is that copywriting is quite a mysterious term for a lot of people, especially in the education world. Ironically, it was for me as well. I was actually writing copy for about a year or two before I realized what it was. So that was a big learning curve for me. But you'll actually see copy kind of everywhere you look. It's any kind of words that are intended to sell any products. So you'll see them on websites, sales pages, social media, emails, print ads. You see them out in like buses, basically any words that are advertising something, a copy, which is why it is extremely important when you are running your own business to pay attention to it. So copy matters. Is basically one of the most important parts of your marketing strategy. Might sound biased, I know, coming from a copywriter, but it's true, because you can have all the ideas, you can have the most gorgeous designs and logos, but if you haven't got the right words that are conveying your message in the right way to the right people, then you're going to struggle to catch their attention and turn them into students. So basically, design can bring students in. It can attract eyes to your social media page, to your website, but it's the words that are going to convey what you stand for, what you offer, and why they should care. And that's ultimately how you build trust and then convince them to buy. So that's why it's crucial that you spend time on getting your messaging right and also paying attention to what you're saying and how you're saying it. But don't worry, that's what we're going to look at today. So before we get started, I know Katie mentioned that a lot of you have until now been focusing on the Chinese market. Having lived in China myself, I've got I'd say not nearly as good of an understanding as Katie as about the Chinese market, but kind of from a copywriting perspective, I noticed a lot of things while I was there. So we'll just cover a few basic differences before getting stuck in. So as you know, the Chinese consumers tend to use specific domestic platforms to shop, whereas when you're looking at the international market, you have access to a much wider audience just by using common platforms like Instagram, LinkedIn, email marketing, websites, which aren't that popular over in China. So you've got a lot more choice as to which platforms you use. That might sound overwhelming, but we're going to look at that in the next slide. Then when it comes to actually writing copy, Chinese consumers, especially parents, if you're targeting parents who are making the purchasing decisions on behalf of their children, I found that they tend to be very interested in qualifications and experience. Of course, kind of the value that you bring their children also matters, but these things tend to be very important. Whereas in the international market, especially if you are targeting adults, people are going to be more interested in your personality, so kind of getting to know who you are and what you're like as a teacher, and then the benefits that you bring to them, so the transformation that your course will help them go through. In China, they tend to be less bothered by cluttered web pages and blocks of text. That was always one thing that really surprised me whenever I'd end up on a Chinese app or something, because over here, it would basically make people click the back button right away. Now, I'm sure that you wouldn't write big blocks of text and things like that, but just because you've been marketing to the Chinese audience. But that's something to keep in mind, that international consumers tend to read clean, concise copy that's super easy to skim, so you can get the general gist of what's happening without kind of being overwhelmed with an essay of text. Then in China, they tend to like to have a lot of access to a lot of information to make decisions, whereas of course that is important. You need to convey the core message, the most important things to international consumers. But when you're writing copy, always think less is more. You should only write what's strictly necessary, what you need to say to get your message across. And again, we're going to look at that in a bit more detail soon. Then lastly, your foreignness tends to be a big selling point in China, whereas in the international market, there is a lot of talk, especially in the ESL world, about native speakerism and the negative impact of that. So I would strongly recommend avoiding any kind of reference to your nationality or whether or not you're a native speaker, and focus on the things that make you you, the things that are unique to you and that your students really enjoy about learning with you. So yeah, that's a quick little overview of some of the main differences. So let's now look at some key international platforms. Obviously, there are a huge range of things that you can choose from, but I've chosen to focus on 4 main ones that you might want to consider, depending on which point in your business journey you're at right now. So first things first, social media. Social media is, love it or hate it, but it is important. So I would recommend having a presence on 1 or 2 international social media channels, because this is how you're going to start to build your audience and reach new people. Which ones you choose will largely depend on your niche. So for example, if you're targeting university students, you might want to look at having Instagram or TikTok. But if you are targeting business professionals, then perhaps you'll want to focus on LinkedIn. I wouldn't say that you need any more than 2. I personally have only been using Instagram. I've been running my business for just around a year, and I've mainly relied on Instagram and email. I'm looking to start LinkedIn as well, but I haven't had to at this point. So the message there is that don't feel like you need to spread yourself across all these different platforms to be seen. Focus your energy and your attention on growing one that you know your audience is hanging out on, and then you'll start to see results. So yeah, social media is important to start building that community. But as soon as you have started to build a community, I would suggest starting an email list as soon as possible. So you probably know that social media channels aren't ours. So we have our profiles, we have our audiences, we put all that work into it, but it's still owned by Meta or LinkedIn. And there have been cases of creators having their accounts locked or hacked and things like that recently, which can have devastating effects if you spent all that time building your audience there. So I would strongly suggest starting an email list as soon as you start to have an engaged community. This isn't only good because you own the audience there, and you have a say over what you do, and there's no algorithm dictating anything. But it's also got a huge return on investment. There was a recent study that showed, on average, for every $1 you spend on email, you get 42 in return. So if that's not a good enough reason to start thinking about building an email list, I don't know what is. The good news is with email that there's so many different platforms you can choose from. Some are free, some are paid. They really depend on what you're looking for, the functionalities that you need. I know some are like MailChimp, Flowdesk. There's a whole range. So I would have a look into that and see which one suits you best. But you don't even need to spend that much money on it at the start, which is one of the brilliant things when you are starting out. Then websites. I know that a lot of people feel like they should rush to have a website quite early on. It's like, I don't know, I actually did the same. So I'll share a personal experience. It was one of the first things that I wanted to do was create a website. It was like, okay, I need that to display my services and then start to build search engine optimization. I did that too early because I hadn't really honed down on who I wanted to work with and what they were struggling with. So my copy was super vague, very generic, and it didn't really get any results. A few months later, I'd kind of found my flow, figured out who I was working with, and spoken to people. So I understood what they needed from me. And then I was able to write more effective copy that then meant my website was worthwhile. So the moral of the story is, if you aren't yet 100% sure who you're working with or what your message is, that's okay. You don't need to rush to put a website up, and that's absolutely fine. Focusing on social media and email is absolutely fine to get you started. But once you have, say, been in business for a year or two, you have a very clear idea of what it is you want to say, what you're offering, and who you're speaking to, then I would suggest starting to look at building a website. The main reason being that building a website is a huge undertaking. So if you are going to outsource the build and the copy, that could be quite expensive. Equally, if you decide to do it yourself, it can be very time consuming. So when you're starting to focus on these different markets, I would suggest taking it slow and starting with email and social media. I just noticed a question there from Pedro, is that in terms of email marketing, email marketing platforms, I personally use one called Sender. So this is actually, I use this because at the start it allowed me to have a free account that offered automation functionality as well. So I quite like that one. I'm not a big fan of MailChimp, which I know that a lot of people speak about.
Yeah,
I find it to be quite funky.
I interrupted.
Sorry.
I was going to say, I totally agree that MailChimp is good. I think if you're sending emails on a larger scale, it's quite cheap for large scale emails, but it's kind of clunky to use. I was going to say the one that I used when I first started out was called Sendinblue.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that.
And it's similar, I think, to the one you mentioned. And also they have a free plan. So if you're just starting out and you only send, I think there's a limit of like 500 emails per day or something. There was a limit, but it was quite a high limit if you're just starting out.
Brilliant. Yeah, there's quite a lot of options out there. And I've also heard of MailerLite. I've never used that, but I know a lot of people who swear by it. So I'd have a look at some of those. They might be good for early stages.
I'd also recommend if you just Google like email platforms for new small businesses, there's always people writing blog posts with like the recommended ones. Every year, these companies are changing the plans that they offer.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Then that actually leads me on nicely to the last one, which is blogs. So Casey just mentioned search on Google and you'll find blogs. That's exactly what you can do for your own business. So if you have, yes, Sender is free to start with. If you enjoy writing, I would say that's a kind of prerequisite. If you don't want to outsource, then you have to enjoy writing, and you have the time to spend on understanding a little bit, just the foundations of search engine optimization. That means so that you show up on Google. Then blogging can be a really lucrative way to advertise your business. So it's a little bit of a slow burner, especially in comparison to things like social media and email marketing. It does take longer to show up on search results and then start to get people through into your sales funnel. But it can be super powerful. One reason being that social media posts obviously last for a matter of hours, maybe days, whereas blog posts can last for years. They're like fine wine. They kind of age, get better with age. So yeah, if you enjoy writing, you can optimize your posts and you've got the time to spend on doing it regularly, then blogging can be a great way to start before you have a website. So all you would need to do is host it and then on something like WordPress, and then just start posting. So you don't actually need a full website at the start to benefit from blogging. Does anyone have any questions on the platforms?
I'm just going through the live chat at the moment. We had lots of people commenting, just saying what platforms they're using, which is great to see. So a lot of people are using social media, it seems, so far, like Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn. So it sounds like a lot of people on social media. And we have another mystery Facebook user. Again, please do click on the Wave video link so we can see your name, who says social media and then building an email list. I'm also going to second what Lauren was saying earlier about getting people on your email list as soon as possible. Like, even if you've got almost no followers and even if you've got no engagement, just set up the email list so you got it ready. Because many of you in this webinar today joined us because I sent you an email saying, we're live now, come join our webinar. Because Facebook and YouTube, which is what we're streaming to, only send notifications to a small number of the audience. They don't send notifications to everyone saying that we're going live. So if you've got email, it goes directly to the people, like it definitely gets to them. Whereas social media has special algorithms that, don't help sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. And it can also be a really nice place to start to build a bit more of a relationship with your followers, especially if you're not that confident with writing copy, or you feel, I think a lot of us suffer from it, myself included, is that when you're sending social media posts out to potentially anyone and everyone, it can be quite overwhelming, and you might start to feel a bit of imposter syndrome and think, like, who am I to start saying this stuff? It's definitely happened to me in the past. But I found that with my email list, I start to build like a closer relationship with them, and you feel like you can open up a bit more, you can be a bit more yourself. So it can also be a good place for you to really develop your tone of voice and get to know your audience.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really love that, because it's more directly going to people, which is great. And also, on most email systems, you can put in the name of the person, like, so automatically input their name and stuff. So it almost feels like you're actually having a conversation with them.
Exactly, yeah. And those people have chosen to be on your list, I think, which is the biggest confidence boost for a lot of people.
Definitely. Which is probably why their return on investment is so high with email marketing. That statistic you had, what was it again? $1 spent results in $40 return?
Yeah.
$42 return. That's
4,200% return on investment is insane.
That is incredible. Whereas I think back to, I tried running social media ads on Facebook a few years back, and I spent, I think it was about $700. And I got a grand total of 0 return. So sometimes, think about what platforms you're using.
You don't know that stuff, do you?
Yeah, I'm going to blame that on bad copy at the time, to be honest. I feel like I didn't know what I was doing. But yeah. Okay, let's have a look at the next question. Yeah, we've got a question here. Lauren, you mentioned finding a niche in the ebook. Just a reminder to get Lauren's ebook. The link is above or below the video, depending on what platform you're using at the moment. What was your first niche, is the question.
So my first niche was not too different from what my niche is now. It started, well, actually, when I left China, I had worked in education for about 5 years, and then I took 1 year off and actually worked for Huawei. I worked in tech for a year, kind of figured I would try something different, and then realized that wasn't for me. So then I felt a bit lost, and I was like, okay, I don't want to be in education, but I want to do something else, but I don't know what. And then naturally, I wound up back at education, but I think it was educators, course creators, and I can't remember what the other one was, but it was very vague and fluffy. And I think that's why I struggled to attract anyone. But then the more time I spent working with teachers, I was like, no, what was I thinking? Like, this is where my heart is, basically. And then I naturally progressed to language teachers.
Excellent. And I'd say, like, most teachers start out quite broad because you think you're trying to catch everyone, right? If you start broad, you're going to reach many more students, so you're going to get more money. But actually, yeah, if you niche down, that's where you're going to find not only the students you love teaching the most, but also those who are looking exactly for what you're offering, and therefore they're going to be willing to pay higher prices, and they're going to be much more engaged with your content. And yeah, we've talked a lot before about the importance of having a niche, I think, in various webinars previously, but it is really, really important.
Yeah, so in the workbook,
really
in the workbook, you'll look at, if you've already got your niche, then great, you can just write that in there, and then you can work through kind of really getting to know them and thinking about your niche from the kind of copywriting perspective.
Awesome. So yeah, just a reminder that link to the workbook should be above or below the video, and it's free. And also a great example of how you can build an email list if you're interested in seeing the process from that side. Okay, let's have a look at any other questions we've got. We've got Verity commenting saying just this information about Sender, which I think was the email marketing system you mentioned, Lauren. Yes. Apparently the free version has got up to 2,500 subscribers and up to 15,000 emails a month, which is more than enough if you're just starting out as an online teacher, I think.
So, yeah, absolutely. I don't think I've hit that limit yet. So,
so thank you for that information, Verity. That's really helpful. Awesome.
Anything else?
I've got a question here from Trisky. Thanks for joining us, Trisky. Is it possible to elaborate more on how email marketing works? Is this something we're going to cover later on in the workshop today?
No, it's not. So we can do that now, for sure.
Cool.
So email marketing is basically like a direct line to your audience. So there are multiple ways that you can start building your email list, but one of the most popular is basically what Katie just mentioned I'm doing now with my free workbook. So that's called a lead magnet. You can click on that, input your email address to receive an email with the lead magnet. So it's an exchange. You give me your email address, I give you the free download. Then of course you're free to either stay on the list and receive my weekly newsletter or leave it. But if you are able to produce a lead magnet of value to your audience, that will help build your email list quicker. And then you'll want to keep in touch with them either on a weekly or bi-weekly, I'd say, basis, where you're sending them newsletters that aren't designed to sell all the time, but give them more value. So it's kind of, you can repurpose some of your content from social media channels so that you don't have to keep doing loads of extra work. But I always like to try and give my subscribers a little bit extra. So something that they're not going to find on my Instagram page, for example. And yeah, then I would say try to stick to some consistency that you can like feasibly keep up with. And you'll find that it takes a little bit of time, I think, as with anything in marketing. But when you do eventually start to promote your services through your emails, then you will see results.
Yeah, excellent. I found that I've had the same kind of experience as well, like the ABH Academy email list that hopefully many people in this webinar are already on. That's why you joined the webinar. When you send emails consistently, people engage better. And you can also use it to link to other things you've made. So for example, you made a blog post on lots of useful tips. You can link across to that and use it to kind of link between different channels too. But I really like the idea of adding extra value in the email itself, because it's like that extra reward. People want to stay on your list because they know they're getting something special.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many different things that you can do in newsletters. I think I wrote a social media post about it. If you want any ideas, I can send the link. But yeah, you can share stories. You can, like Katie said, share links to blog posts. If you have a podcast or something, you can share that. So it's really up to you. And there is no right or wrong. and say just experiment and see what works best for your audience.
Fantastic. Great. Really great tips there on email marketing. Fantastic. Okay, I'm just having a look. I think we've covered most of the questions, which is great. Just you saying much appreciated. So yeah, thank you. Glad that helped. Cool. Let me just remove that caption I put there. Where I got that caption up from? Sorry, technology is defeating at the moment. There we go. Okay. Shall we jump back to Lauren then and your slides here?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have any other questions about the different platforms, then feel free to drop them in the box and I'll answer them later on. But now we're going to look at 5 different things that you can do to write better copy, basically instantly. And yes, you can use these on any channel. I'll mention if any of them are particularly suited to certain channels, but they're general copywriting tips. So first things first, you want to personalize your message. So this can mean various things, basically. One of the most common things, the easiest to implement, is to address your reader directly. So instead of speaking in general terms about certain groups of, say, IELTS learners or business English professionals, you can speak directly to the reader by saying you. So although you are speaking to the whole of your target audience, when the reader is reading it, it feels like they're in a one-to-one conversation with you. This is one of the most powerful and persuasive things that you can do to write copy that stands out to your reader. It is said that the word you just catches our attention instantly. So that's why it can be really powerful in like email subject lines, in website headlines, social media posts, basically anywhere. Speak directly to your reader. In the same way, asking questions is really a really good way to break down that barrier between you and them. Obviously, when you're speaking to people that have never met you before, there is naturally some kind of distance between you, but asking questions and drawing them into the conversation can help them feel part of what you're saying and more engaged in what they're reading. Then personalization also means tailoring your message to your niche. So by that, I mean, think about what exactly they're struggling with. They're not just finding it hard to speak English. They're struggling with it for a specific reason. So back to the example of business professionals, perhaps they are struggling to get their point across in meetings. They're feeling insecure and they're worrying that they are undermining their professional credibility, for example. So including specific examples that show that you understand exactly what they're going through can help your copy stand out in that sea of samey messaging of things like speak with confidence and speak fluently. When you start to use real examples of situations that they find themselves in, that message will pop a bit more to them. Then considering the audience awareness level. So I don't know how many of you are aware of this kind of scale. I'll just recap it quickly. So you have in any target audience, you'll have, I think it's 5 different stages. You'll have people who are completely unaware, so they perhaps don't even know that they need to learn English yet or improve their English. Then you'll have people who are what's called problem aware, so they know that they have a problem, so they know that they need to improve their English for work, but they don't yet know how. Then you'll have people who are solution aware, so they know they have a problem and they know that solutions exist, but they haven't found your specific solution yet. And then you move on to people who know you and they are kind of in your world. So looking at that in terms of the platforms that we've spoken about, we'd have unaware people who probably on social media, but they have no idea you exist. Then you'll have problem aware people who are, again, perhaps starting to see social media content and understanding that they have a problem. Then once they're solution aware, they'll know that different things exist, perhaps that they already follow some teachers who are teaching what they need to learn, may or may not be following you. And then once they're very aware of you, they'll be following you. They'll probably be on your email list. They may have visited your website, things like that. So you'll see there that there's a scale of different people, even within your target audience. That's not to overwhelm you. My message there is basically that you want to think about that when you're writing your copy. So for example, if you're writing an email, these people have signed up to your email list. That means they know you, likely know that they are looking for a solution to a problem. So you can write in a more direct way. If you have the solution to their problem, you can address that directly. Whereas if you start speaking about your solution straight away to somebody who's never heard of you, you're going to alienate them probably straight away. So when you're when you're speaking to people who you know aren't aware of you, so for example, if you're running cold ads, or if you're posting reels on social media that are intended to go to a new audience, then you'll want to speak more about the problem. So for example, it could be 5 phrases that you need in your business English meetings. Something quite general. You're not speaking about your solution, you're just speaking about the problem. So there's a whole lot that we could go into on this, but I won't overwhelm you. All you need to know is that when you're writing your copy, just think about who the intended reader is. So that means obviously they're the challenges that they're facing, the pain points that they've got, but also what stage of the journey they're at. So if they're a stranger or if they already know you. I will show you a couple of examples now, and then at the end of this one, we can answer any questions. So I'll read these out. IELTS students often get confused about which preposition to use after different adjectives and nouns. That's why I created this handy revision guide. You'll see that this example speaks, there's nothing wrong with it, but it speaks very generally. So it's not speaking to any one in particular. Even if I was an IELTS student reading this, it may not kind of resonate with me. So the second one, do you struggle to remember whether a noun or adjective needs an at, about, or with? You're not alone. Preposition agreements are one of the most common mistakes IELTS students make. Here's a handy guide you can use to revise from. So you'll see in this one that we've used the word you 3 times. We've started with a question. So instantly that's going to make the reader say yes or no. And if they say no, that's absolutely fine. Then they're probably not who this course is made for. And then we've also included a bit more of a specific example. So do you struggle to remember whether a noun or adjective needs an at, about, or with? So there you'll see that we've brought that to life a little bit more. We can put themselves in those shoes and answer that question to yes or no. So that's just, an example of how to personalize your message a little bit more in a few different ways. And also back to the audience awareness thing, because I'm worried that I've overwhelmed people now. So this message here could be suitable for people who are quite early on in their journey. So they may not know about you, but you've addressed this problem and given them a free solution. Okay, so just a few kind of points to help you personalize your messages. So ask questions. Show that you understand pain points by addressing them. I'm going to cover this in a bit more detail because I know a lot of people worry about kind of coming across as mean. Don't worry, there are ways around that. Then using relatable references. So this means both in terms of the situation that they're in, the struggles that they're facing, the desires, the outcome that they want. But also it can refer to things that they're interested in. So if you've done market research and you know that say you're targeting university students and they have one thing in common, like they like a certain celebrity, for example, you can even refer to things like that. That would just make your message stand out to the right people as well. But that would take quite a bit of research to understand, although it is very effective. And then lastly, employ a conversational tone. I'll speak about some more techniques to do that later on. But that comes from saying you, speaking directly to the reader, and also using questions and drawing them in. Does anyone have any questions about that?
I was going to say there's really, really fantastic tips. Thank you for sharing that. And this is something I hadn't really thought about, but you're right, having a question that speaks directly to the reader. They immediately go, oh, yes, that's me. And then they keep reading, which is fantastic. I love that. That's something I just took away from that. I was like, oh, wow, I need to do more of that in my own copy. So that's really helpful. And your point as well about having understanding where people are at in their journey, I think is really important, because sometimes people aren't ready to buy yet. And so if you're writing things that are kind of phrased that people are about to make that buying decision, you're going to alienate everyone who's still trying to figure out why they're struggling to do well in the IELTS exam in the first place, to go back to that example.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you ever look at any questions here? See, you covered lots of really useful information. We've got someone on Facebook just saying all clear, thank you. So that's great.
Perfect. That's what I like to hear.
Good. And we have Peter here as well saying, yes, awesome, thank you so much. Thank you, Peter, for that comment. Really good to hear.
Yeah.
I feel like
Okay.
questions so far. But anyone got any questions? Do feel free to pop them in the comments. Also, like as we go through the webinar, like please pop the questions in as you go along, as you think of them, because we'll come to them at the kind of each section as we go through.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so tip number 2 is get super specific. So you'll see a lot of very vague copy in the language learning world. And by that, I mean buzzwords. So things like innovative or unique, which have been overused to the point that we're not really sure what they mean anymore. Flowery sentences, so where you're trying to be a bit too descriptive. And vague claims, so things like the best language course. They might sound nice, but they don't do anything for your credibility. So in order to build trust with your audience, you want to get super specific with what you're saying. And here are some different ways to do that. So firstly, explain exactly what's in it for your reader. So like I just mentioned, you want to avoid superlatives and subjective language. So things like the most effective way to learn English, the best business English course there is, because these sentences like these leave room for doubt and confusion in the reader's mind. I don't know about you, but if I see something that claims it's the best, I instantly want to see proof of that, because otherwise it's like, well according to who? Your CEO? So instead of saying sentences like that, you can make it specific, but backing it up with social proof. Like if you know that you have got a proven or unique methodology, how do you know that? Bring that into your copy to evidence it. And then also explain to the reader what your solution does for them in specific terms. So we'll get to that in a second with the describe things in more detail. But yeah, avoid superlatives and subjective language and get more specific, like drill into the message and think, what do I really mean by the most effective? Like, what makes it most effective? Then secondly, use specific numbers. So you'll see a lot of businesses are starting to do this now, but in the past, it's always been over 100 students have used our methodology. And it's been proven by some studies that these claims are less trustworthy than if you just use the specific number. So there's nothing wrong with having 101 students. I think people just feel like, oh, I don't want to say that. It sounds better if it's over 100. But actually, to your reader, 101 would be more powerful and more convincing. So if you are using numbers at any point, I would strongly suggest using the specific number where possible. There's really nothing wrong with saying that. And I think actually a lot of the time when you see, it tends to be bigger businesses using things like over 100, and then you find out it was 101. It's like, well, like, because over 100 could be anything. So use specific numbers where possible to increase trust. Then describe things in more detail. So by that, instead of using common industry phrases like speak with confidence, think about what that confidence means. So how does that confidence show up in your students' lives? Back to the example of business professionals, it could mean that they're able to walk into meetings feeling like they've got this, like their palms aren't sweaty and they aren't worried about stumbling over words. Or for people walking into exams, for example, they might feel focused on the end goal instead of worrying about the little things. So when you find yourself writing what I would say is quite a vague sentence like speak with confidence, drill down into what that confidence means. How does that show up in their lives? And then that will help your message speak more directly to the right people, basically. And then finally, cut the fluff. By that, I mean filler words. So filler words are things like really, very, like I just said, that add no value to your copy, but we just put them in naturally, I think, because we use them a lot when we speak. So when you are writing like you speak, which you should when you're writing copy, it's quite easy for these words to sneak in. But when you go back to edit it, try to remove anything that's not adding value to the sentence to streamline the message, because that makes the sentences shorter, and shorter sentences are easier for readers to follow. So a couple of examples. Quick disclaimer. I know my first one says confidently, This is just an example of drilling into a message. So here we've got speak like a native. One level down from that could be speak like a native quickly, clearly, and confidently. So that's a bit more specific as to what the writer might mean. But you could even go further than that and explain what that means for them in their everyday lives. For example, this course helps you improve your English proficiency. You can move down to follow and engage in complex conversations with ease. So that paints a bit more of a picture in the reader's minds. It helps them envisage themselves in that situation and think about what that would feel like to be able to follow these complex conversations easily. Then finally, after completing this course, you'll be fluent in English. Another kind of vague sentence is like, what does that really mean? You could change that to something like, by the end of this course, you'll have the bulletproof confidence you need to power through your presentation and make your message heard. Again, makes it more specific. It takes the reader from sitting at their desk or reading their phone to being in that meeting and thinking about what that would be like for them. Then a few little grammar points again. So to get super specific, you want to dig deep into the meaning of the sentence. So it's normal. I do it in my first draft. So I'll write something quite vague when it comes out, like it's just the first thing that comes to mind. And then when I get to edit my copy, I'll revisit those ideas and think, like, kind of put yourself in the reader's shoes and think, what does this mean for them? Or what am I trying to say here? And that's when you can start to paint a picture of what that benefit looks like for the reader. So that's where the understanding of the target audience will come in useful. Use actual numbers rather than rounding up, and remove filler words like that. Just really, you can search them online and you'll find a whole list of things that eagle-eyed editors hate. Any questions?
Cool. That was really helpful. I have to admit, I'm guilty of, I think, all of those mistakes. So thank you for that.
I have been too. When I first learned what copywriting was, and I was like, oh, I've actually been writing copy for a lot longer than I realized. I would go back through my old stuff and see all of these things.
Yeah, it's really interesting, that statistic, that info you had about, like, if you say 100 or more than 100, it sounds less authentic. That's really interesting to hear, actually, because again, we like to think it sounds better, but you're right. People like to hear it was exactly 123 students who really loved that course or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I think it adds more credibility. And again, I think there's nothing wrong with it. I think if you've got like 10 students, it's great.
Exactly. No, I think that's, and people will really appreciate that, particularly when you're advertising like as an independent teacher. They're not expecting to have thousands of students. In fact, they might be a little bit confused as to why you're teaching thousands of students. I mean, great if you have been able to grow your business that far with group classes and self-pay courses or whatever it is. But people aren't expecting you to have thousands of students. It's better to have an accurate number, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Just let me look at the questions. If anyone's got any questions, please do pop them in the comments. By the way, there is about like a 20-second lag between when we actually talk and then it actually gets streamed. I think that's some security feature on like Facebook and YouTube.
Oh, okay.
So if we're a bit delayed getting back to your question, it's because there's a bit of a lag before we see the question popping up. Because it takes time for our video to get streamed to you, then for you to write the comment, then for us to see it. So apologies if anyone is wondering what's happened to their question. We've got a comment here from Peter just saying, thank you for the very clear examples. It really helps. Yeah, absolutely. Again, really useful to have those examples. So thank you, Lauren, for those. By the way, there is going to be like a recording of this. If anyone wants to zip back and have a look at the examples again later, don't worry. You can rewatch the webinar later on and have a look at those if you need to review those examples again, because they were so helpful. Awesome. We've got Dana commenting, learning lots. That's great to hear. Don't think we have any questions, which is...
No, that's good. That means I'm doing
explaining it. I hope. Do feel free to pop questions in the comments as we go.
Yes.
This is your opportunity in a live stream to ask questions.
Okay, tip number 3 is one of the hottest conversation topics I have with teachers on a weekly basis, I'd say. It's writing with empathy. So you may or may not know, I'll cover the basics just in case. When you're marketing your classes to people, you are thinking about the pain points that you're solving. So your service solves a problem for them. So back to the example of business professionals, they may need to learn English to get a promotion or get noticed at work, things like that, communicate their message more clearly. So you are helping them bridge that gap, solve that problem. So the thing that a lot of teachers get stuck on is where to draw the line with talking about pain points, because obviously you're there to help people, you're there to serve, you don't want to make them feel bad about the situation that they're in. The fact is that you do need to mention pain points, because pain is more motivating than pleasure. I recently read a quote which I found really interesting. It was something like, people jog towards pleasure but run from pain. And it's so true. So we make purchasing decisions basically to avoid pain rather than to get pleasure. So you do need to address these pain points early on in your copy for two reasons: so that you are showing the audience that they're in the right place, and that you show them that you understand the situation that they're in. But of course, there is a fine line between speaking about pain points and then coming across as not very nice and alienating your readers. But there are a few easy ways to make sure that you're not doing this. And one of the easiest is to shift the focus away from the pain and onto the transformation that you offer. So I'll show you an example in a second, but that basically means mentioning the pain, but then focusing on the outcome of your service. Then secondly, you will want to validate your readers' concerns. So you've identified the pain, and then you want to show them that you understand what they're going through. So that could be through multiple ways. It could be, as you'll see here, through highlighting personal experience. If you have learned English yourself and now you're in a position where you're teaching, you could draw on your own experiences if they resonate with your ideal clients. If not, if you've learned another language or you've been in another situation that is kind of like relevant to your target audience, then you can use that. But equally, you can show them that you understand through years of experience, through working with people in a similar situation to them. And then you want to reinforce that they're not alone and that you're there to help. So that's how you start to, you've addressed the pain, but you've avoided kind of going too deep into that, and you've started to empathize with them and empower them. And then, yes, you want to empower your reader by showing them that there is a viable solution and that it's well within their reach. So one really effective way to do this is by showing that there is a solution before you introduce yours. This works particularly well on sales pages. So these are long form pages that are designed to sell one specific offer. Once you've addressed the pain points, if you explain to them why the solutions that they've tried in the past haven't worked, that can help build credibility before you introduce your own offer. So, for example, I don't know why, it's business English is just on my mind today. Let's go back to business English professionals. So somebody wants to learn English for the purpose of getting a promotion, say. So they might be feeling insecure about their current level and worried that it's holding them back in their career. Perhaps they have taken business English courses before, but they haven't worked and they're just feeling a bit defeated. So let's say your solution helps them overcome those challenges by forcing them to practice regular conversation rather than business English jargon. So you could highlight the fact that business English jargon isn't necessary to become a fluent or confident English speaker. And then what they need is more practice on topics that they enjoy speaking about. So by explaining that, you start to build trust before you introduce your solution, and you're empowering them by showing that, yes, these other solutions haven't worked for you in the past, but it's not because it's you, it's because the solution wasn't right. So that's a nice way to bridge that gap between the pain and your solution without making anybody feel bad about anything. So some examples. So I will say that these the cross examples are quite extreme. It's rare that you see copy this nasty, but I like to go extreme for the sake of the example. So you know that if you use the wrong word again, you won't get the promotion you've been dreaming of. Isn't it time to do something about it? So nasty, quite direct, is really focusing on the negative result. But you could switch that around to say, no more worrying whether you've used the right word. Our courses arm you with the confidence you need to power through your presentation and make your message heard. So that's the example I mentioned earlier. We've touched on the pain point, which is worrying whether or not they've used the right word. You don't need to drill in too deep to that because they know what that feels like. They know what that means for them. And then instead of dwelling on the pain, we're speaking about the opposite, which is the transformation, having the confidence they need to do the thing they want to do. Second one, this would be an example that you might see in a bio, so a sales page bio, a website bio, or something like that. My biggest achievement is becoming fluent in English. So this one's a little bit cocky. It might make the reader feel like, oh, okay, so you became fluent in English, but that doesn't help me with the situation I'm in. It might even make them feel like it's further away, that is possible for everyone else except for them. So instead, you could rewrite that to relate more directly to the reader by saying something like, after years of cringing every time I spoke English, I eventually overcame my fear of making mistakes. Now I'm fluent, and that's how I know you can be too. So you're showing the before, the struggling with English. Then if this is a longer bio, you can go into more detail about the actual process of becoming fluent. But then showing that you are fluent and saying that you know they can be too empowers them and shows them that it's possible, rather than just stating that you're fluent. And then lastly, no one understands a word you say and you're embarrassed every time you speak. Again, it's quite rare that you see copy like this, but it does exist. You feel like a total badass whenever you prepare your presentations, but as soon as you stand up to speak, you freeze, forget, freak out. I've been there. So there we've kept a more light-hearted tone, and then because this is being said from personal perspective, like I've been there, it builds that connection with the reader and makes them realize that they're not alone. Okay, and then to write with empathy, you want to show that you understand the situation that they're in. So like we've mentioned, that could be through personal experience, it could be through speaking about what you've noticed throughout the years teaching different students. Use storytelling. So if you do have personal experience, then put your reader in that situation and explain the challenges that you've resolved and how you've got to where you are today. Use encouraging sentences. So things like, that's how I know you can be fluent too, to empower them and show them that it's possible. And then avoid questions that make them feel bad. So if you are going to ask questions and it does tackle the pain point, which is okay, just make sure to soften your language a bit. I think when you reread things yourself, you'll be able to tell if it's crossing a line. Like, put yourself in the reader's shoes and think, okay, if I was really struggling with learning English, would this make me feel bad, or would it make me just say, yes, this is me, I need this? So yeah. Any questions on empathy?
I think, again, not so question specific on empathy, we've got a few comments just saying, great points, thank you, it's super helpful. So thank you for that, English with Queen. And I get really agree, this is so helpful, even for me, sitting here learning a lot from this. So thank you so much again. Particularly these points about like empathizing with your audience and showing that you can relate to them, and particularly if you've been in similar positions to them before. I think sometimes we're afraid to get like vulnerable when we post things, particularly on like social media. We don't know who's seeing it. We're kind of nervous to say that, you know, when I was learning a second language, I also struggled with whatever. But yeah, like that really helps people relate and know that you can help them because you were able to do the same yourself.
Exactly. Yeah, I think kind of, I guess, school life and everything kind of taught us that you should always put your professional foot forward and speak in a professional tone and don't kind of give away your vulnerabilities and things like that. But actually in the online business world, especially when you're targeting language students, I think it's really, really powerful to show that you really do understand what they're going through, because it can be quite a nerve-wracking thing, can't it, to be speaking in a different language to somebody, but knowing that that person who's teaching you has been in that situation and dealt with the same challenges can really help boost your trust and confidence in them.
Definitely. And it means they can relate to you as a person as well. Like, you seem more authentic and believable. Everyone struggles with something, you know. No one can say, oh, I'm amazing at languages. I became fluent in 10 languages in just a year. That's why I can help you too. They're not going to believe it.
No. But you do see some of that marketing out there, actually. Sometimes I get served ads. I'm always interested to see them because, yeah, some of them are quite like direct, and they'll say you can get fluent in 3 months. I got fluent in this language in 3 months. And it's like, don't believe it.
Yeah, exactly.
But what I have found is that teachers do tend to write with empathy anyway. So just being aware of this can help overcome any insecurities when you are writing sales copy, because once you understand the kind of grammar points and things that you should be thinking about, it can be easier to then put your copy out there with confidence. So I wouldn't worry. I wouldn't start to think, oh my God, have I been writing, like making my audience feel bad? Because you probably haven't. But just knowing these things can help in the future.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. Fantastic. Oh wait, we had a question here from Brian. I work for 2 platforms. I want to transition. How do you suggest I do this? Is this asking about like going independent, like getting started with independent teaching, Brian? I think so. Do you have any suggestions on this, Lauren? Like if someone's just getting started out in terms of maybe picking a platform perhaps, and getting their first content out maybe?
In terms of their own channels rather than like teaching?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. I would suggest, first of all, if you know who you want to work with, then have a look through these different platforms and think about where they are most likely to be. And then I would set up on that one. So I would say Instagram tends to be kind of a catch-all for most niches. So if you're not 100% sure on where your audience is, there probably are like a large chunk of them on Instagram. Equally, LinkedIn, I've heard, is really, really powerful for a lot of different teaching niches. So I would start with one of them, obviously, depending on if the audience is actually there, and just start building content, engaging with people. Try to keep in mind that it is a slow process. So social media is probably one of the fastest ways to start building a community, but it still isn't like a click your fingers, like I think a lot of the kind of social media gurus would make you believe. It does take time and patience. So follow people, engage with people's content, and you'll slowly start to build up an audience, and just keep posting things that solve your audience's problems, and you'll start to see growth.
Yeah, absolutely. So posting valuable, useful content and engaging with people is the way to go. And it took a long time for me as well, building up like social media following and things. I'm still working on it, you know. So if you're really working with 2 platforms, Brian, you might want to gradually start building up your social media following while keeping those going, so you've got the income coming in. And once you get momentum going, start to sort of promote your classes and start getting students.
Exactly. Yeah, and if you have students on these platforms, I mean, I'm not sure how the rules of the platforms work, but you could always tell them that you've started an Instagram and there's free content there for them that they would find helpful, and that will start to build up that following without you having to just promote to a cold audience. Absolutely.
Great. But quite a few people commented just sort of agreeing with everything, which is always great to see. So English your queen. I think empathy is also a great way to draw them in. Absolutely.
Yes.
Peter's comment here on social media gurus. Meh. I love it.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. He's also said, sorry, my computer just glitched. He's also said, I've been on a lot of call for coaches and they cover most of the things you do, but you do it much better than them. So thank you, Lauren. It's really great feedback. Thank you, Peter.
Glad to hear that.
Fantastic. Cool. We've got maybe someone looking for reassurance here. I'm on 2 platforms still and getting more and more independent, building slowly. Am I bad at social media?
No.
If empathy needed. Yeah.
No, you're definitely not. It is, I think, because social media is part of our lives, like our personal lives, there's just this expectation that everyone is good at it. I've found since I started my business, a lot of people who work for companies, they don't have a business, they don't have like a business social media, but they just kind of think, well, I would be able to do that. Like anyone can do that. So when, like at the start of my business, my following was, I think I had like 250 followers, and I could see it in people's eyes. It's almost like, well, why? Like, how have you not got thousands? So I have been where you are, and worry about that, but you're really not. I think what you need to do is try and block all of that out, focus on the content, just think about your audience and the people that you want to the kind of worlds that you want to get involved with. Engage with these people, engage with other teachers as well, because I have found that teaching communities are super, super supportive. A lot of teachers I work with say that the majority of their followers are teachers, but that doesn't impact the fact that they are able to find students through these platforms. So I would just try and immerse yourself in these worlds, learn from other people, or block them out, because sometimes seeing too much from other people can be too overwhelming. And yeah, just focus on your content and posting things, experimenting, accept that some things aren't going to work, some things are going to work, and you'll gradually find your route. If you look at my Instagram page, you'll see that I've gone through about 3 or 4 different color schemes. All my content starts super vague, and it's gradually, only recently have I really kind of lent into my niche of language teaching, and I'm starting to see more results from more growth from that. So yeah, it's a learning curve. It's a tool. It's not something that you should be good at straight away, and it's something that changes all the time as well.
Definitely. And actually, that's a good point about changing, because the algorithms and stuff on social media platforms change all the time. So some people are good at social media one day and the next day they're not. So, there's always opportunities, and it's think about looking forward. I like the idea of just building a community, focusing on your students and your connections that you've got, and trying not to compare yourself to others. I think also we can sometimes get hung up on what are called like vanity metrics, like how many people are following, how many people are liking your posts. And you're like, oh, only 5 people liked the post, it was terrible. But if those 5 people all then reached out and booked classes with you, that's an amazing post,
Yeah, exactly.
So think about the ultimate end goal is having students, and don't get too hung up on like some of those metrics that you see. The social media platforms want you to get more likes and things, but actually what we want is more students. So yeah, don't worry, it's slow going. They'll get there.
Yeah. One thing I've found is I've been through all of that. I still go through it, I guess. Like post something, doesn't get many likes, you think, oh God, should I delete it? And then someone will reach out and say that was really useful. Or I remember one post didn't do very well, but I ended up getting an invitation to speak on a podcast from it. So it's like everything you do is working towards getting more students and helping people, being more visible. And back to that kind of customer awareness scale, people might be looking at your posts and finding value in them, and you might send something out today, hasn't got many likes, but in 3 weeks, months time, that person might have been following your post, might have found that really engaging and useful, and then eventually decided to reach out and book a class with you. So it's not like each post has to do something there and then. Each post kind of serves a purpose in the bigger picture.
Definitely. So keep at it is the main message here.
Yes.
Great. Okay, I think that's most of the comments. Should we? I'm just at the time as well. I know a few people have had to go for classes, which is fine. Don't worry. If you've got to go for a class, there will be a replay. You can just watch the replay. It'll be on YouTube and Facebook. Same links as what you've already got. So if you do have to pop off the classes, but obviously if you're still hanging around, thank you for sticking with us.
Yes.
Because there's so much great value here. Thank you so much, Lauren, as well, for sharing all of this, because it's amazing.
So tip number 4 is, I think it sounds a bit vague and fluffy, but I don't really know how else to say it. Be friendly, be you. So one of the easiest ways to attract followers and students is by being authentic. So showing who you are. You've chosen your niche for a reason, and the chances are that you relate to them in some way. So being yourself is only a good thing. It's only going to attract the right people. So there's a few different ways that you can do this, because actually it can be easier said than done. It can be hard to find your personality on paper and kind of really get that out there. So first things first, I'd say write like you're speaking to a friend. So contrary to popular belief, you don't need to write like in a stuffy professional tone to be seen as professional or respectful. Obviously, you don't want to be too casual. You don't want to speak to them like a friend when you're out drinking, but you do want to speak to them like you know them, like be warm, welcoming, approachable, and you. So that means using simple conversational language, the kind of terms that you would use in everyday speech. So one example, when you're speaking, would you say, I ensure this is going to happen, or I'll make sure this is going to happen? Chances are you're going to say make sure. So try to opt for the more conversational words, because they're small things, but they make a big difference when you read the tone of the copy. It's completely different. So using these conversational words that you would use in everyday life can break down that barrier and make your reader feel like you're more approachable, basically. Share insights into your world. So this is a really good thing to do in emails. If you do start your email list, share stories about your life and relate these to the points you're making throughout your copy. So one example, around Christmas, I sent an email that basically told the story of the worst Christmas present I'd ever received, which sounded like when you start reading it, it's like kind of, where's this going? But at the same time, it's a story, so you're engaged because we love stories. And then eventually I transitioned into saying that although it was the worst present I ever received, I can't wait for this Christmas because I know it related basically to telling stories in your copy. So I told this story, and then I used that as an example to say, this is a good technique to use to catch attention. And then because it was around Christmas, I said one of the best times that to be looking out for these stories is when you're completely far away from your desk and around family, because funny stuff always happens when you're around family. So that then gave people a few tips on how to take mundane everyday things and turn them into like relatable, funny lessons that they could use in their emails or their social media content. So that applies to anything. Like if you like think about kind of everyday things and lessons that you can learn from that and apply to language learning. So say, for example, you overcooked your dinner. You could say, that taught me, I don't know, to be more aware, and then like relate that awareness in some way to what you're teaching. That was probably not the best example, but if I think of any others, I will let you know. But then that has the double effect of giving the reader an insight into your life, and also making them more engaged through in a more unique way. Then ask questions throughout your copy. Again, I've said this a couple of times. So this is a super important, powerful technique that you can use and you can just implement right away. These draw the reader into the conversation by asking questions that get them nodding or thinking, and it makes them feel like you're speaking to them. So yeah, again, makes it approachable and conversational. So a couple of examples here. Firstly, before I read them out, I will say that I stand by the fact that good copy is concise, and you'll notice that these examples are a lot longer than the original. The main reason being is that I'm just trying to give you an idea of what adding personality to your copy could look like. So when you are doing this, you'll want to make sure that you're doing it in places that it doesn't matter if the copy is a little bit longer. So for example, you wouldn't want to lengthen your pricing section by trying to inject a lot of personality in there because you want that message to get across clearly. Whereas in these kind of like fine print areas, you might want to add a little bit of personality, which doesn't matter if it gets a bit longer. So for example, you can rearrange up to 3 sessions. Fine, it's a bit bland. So you could say, sometimes you have to work late, sometimes your dog eats your homework. Whatever your reason for skipping a class, I won't hold it against you. In fact, I'll let you cancel and rebook up to 3 sessions for free. So you see, you've just added a little bit more in there. Might get a chuckle from the reader, might not. But it's a bit more, a bit more engaging than the first one. Then the second one, my lessons are interactive with a focus on speaking. If you're looking to just pick up the language, you're in the wrong place, my friend. My lessons are all about interaction, so no, you can't hide behind your textbook. So there you might be speaking to a conversation that's going on in their head, and also showing your kind of cheeky personality, and the fact that you're not going to let them get away with skipping out. So when you're trying to write like you, that will largely depend on your personality. But I would start by thinking about how you want your brand to come across. So that I talk you through this in the download that we've mentioned. So you basically start to think about some adjectives that describe the personality you want to convey, the feeling that you want to give your readers when they're reading your copy, and then start to translate that into words. Use questions, again, to bring them into the conversation. Use shorter words. By that, I mean the less formal version of words. Ensure, make sure is off the top of my head. But there are, again, if you search that on Google, you'll find a whole long list of things that you never even realized you were doing. I think it comes from like writing academically and things like that. Use kind of language that you'd use with a friend, and then use contractions. So this is a really easy one, but so many people forget about it. Instead of saying it is or we are, say it's or we're. That instantly transforms the tone of your message. Any questions?
Awesome. That's super helpful. And I agree, like sometimes we don't think of how important this is, but being friendly and being more authentic in the way that you speak to people in your content is really, and I love those examples. If your dog ate your homework, I'll let you rearrange your sketch. I love that. That's really good.
Yeah, so just think about the kind of things that you would say if you're like with someone that you're super comfortable with, I'd say, and then see how you can bring that into your copy. And it is, once you start thinking in this way, you'll see it suddenly like, oh, it's so obvious. Why wasn't I doing that all along? But we're so used to just like churning out content that it's easy to forget about this stuff.
Absolutely. We kind of focus too much maybe on trying to look professional, but actually people want to know you. Cool.
Yeah.
When we look at the chat, I don't think we're seeing any particular questions. Just got a comment from Ivy saying Ivy's tuning in. Great to see you, Ivy. Ivy joins lots of our webinars. Always great to see a familiar face. No worries, you can catch up on the replay later, Ivy, if you missed the start. That's cool. Okay. I think we're good with questions. Okay, you've got so much detail in your slides and in all your there, so it looks like we're all good with the questions. But yeah, keep the questions coming in the chat if you've got any questions at all. We'd love to pick up on those as we go.
Yeah. So the last tip is to write concisely. So going back to what we said earlier about the Chinese consumers tend to be fine with a big block of text. People overseas don't tend to be. So the idea there is that you break your paragraphs up, break your sentences up, make sure that you're writing only what's strictly necessary. So you can do that by cutting filler words. Again, that really vary. These things don't add to your message, but they do take up valuable space. So if they're not serving a purpose, if they're not highlighting your tone of voice, because sometimes they do, we'll emphasize there that I'm not saying remove really or very from your copy all the time. Sometimes it does help convey your personality. But if you're using them excessively, then they are taking up valuable space. Use power verbs and adjectives. So instead of saying something like run quickly, you could say sprint, or instead of very pretty, beautiful. Just a couple of examples. So that conveys the same idea in fewer words and the message is more powerful. Keep sentences to less than 20 words. So this is a general rule because obviously you don't want all of your sentences to be the same length because then your copy would be hard to read and quite boring. But it's a good rule of thumb, especially when you're writing for SEO, to think that you don't want the majority of your sentences to be over 20 words because then it starts to get complicated and you're going to lose the reader's attention. So it's good to vary up your sentence lengths. So you probably are doing this naturally, but you'll definitely see it if you look at sales pages and emails and things like that. You'll see that people have like a long sentence and then maybe a couple of word sentence and then a slightly longer one. So it varies. So it varies the rhythm of your copy, which makes it easier and more enjoyable to read. You know, when you read something, it's almost like, sounds so nerdy, but like it was fun to read. That tends to come from the rhythm. So the readers kept you kind of on your toes, so to speak, by varying the pace of the text. So try to keep that in mind, but don't get too hung up on it because it can be easy to then think, oh my God, all my sentences need to be under 20 words. And then you start to affect your original message. But yeah, just a general rule of thumb to keep the majority of sentences to less than 20 words. And then one way to do that is by only saying what's necessary. So it's very easy to waffle. We all do it. I still do it when I'm writing my drafts, especially in blog posts. You'll just write all these ideas and then you'll think, no, it's all important. I need to say it all. But if you take a break, go back to it with fresh eyes, then you'll start to see that you've either repeated ideas or that things aren't really that necessary to get your message across. Cut it out. They say in editing, it's like cut your darlings or something. Kill your darlings. So instead of getting hung up on all these things that you think are well written, which they probably are, but it doesn't mean that they need to be there. You can just get rid of them and it will streamline your message and make it easier for the reader to stay on the page and engage with, because that is the ultimate aim. You want to keep the reader's attention, otherwise your content's not doing its job. So one example, study for 30 minutes a day and you'll start speaking your new language very quickly. That's all it will take for you to confidently ask for prices, give directions, book a table at a restaurant or something else with a great accent in your new language. This was actually adapted from something I did find on the internet. So yes, it was very long and repetitive. So you'll see here you've got study for 30 minutes a day, great. But then it says that's all it will take. So that's kind of repeated the idea. And then you've got a few examples, book a table at a restaurant, very long example, and then something else, like anything else, with a great accent. It's all just a lot of information that could be said in a lot shorter way. So here I've shortened it to say, study for just 30 minutes per day and gain the skills and confidence to accurately ask for prices, give directions, or speak on the phone in English. And again, that could even be shortened further by adjusting the start of it. So that's just an example of rereading your message. Think, I've said this thing once, it doesn't need to be said again in the same bit of copy, so you can cut it out. Yep, just to recap, so you want to cut filler words like really or that, avoid repetition, include what's strictly necessary. So for example, if you go back here, you'll see this something else, this extra example is not necessary at all. You've got, you've already listed a few examples, so the reader can they have a clear idea of what this can help them achieve in their mind. So you don't need to say it again. Look for shorter ways to say things. So using power words instead of describing things in more detail. Okay, I'll just recap everything we said. So the 5 fundamental tips that you should be able to use right away are personalizing your message. So speaking to your reader by addressing them using the word you, and by making your message hyper relevant to them and the situation that they're in. Get really specific, again, so specific to the situation that they're in, specific with the words that you're using and the way that you're describing your courses. So instead of saying things like the best, explain why it's the best, dig deeper into those messages. Write with empathy, show that you understand what your reader's going through and that there is a solution available and you're there to help them. Be yourself, write like you're speaking to a friend. Remember that, like, when you are teaching independently, you don't have to adhere to like strict corporate rules or anything. This is your business, you can build it in your way and speak how you want to speak. And then lastly, write concisely. So cutting words that aren't necessary and ideas that you've kind of mentioned a few too many times. And yeah, that is everything. Does anyone have any questions?
That was fantastic. I just want to say thank you so much for all of that information. Like, I'm definitely going to go back and watch the replay as well, because so much useful stuff there. And even if you've been writing content for quite a while, there's stuff we don't even realize. Especially sometimes there's positive stuff we've been doing already, which is always great. But often there's also stuff we haven't been doing that we didn't even know would be so powerful. So there's some really, really helpful tips. So thank you so much for those. Yeah, if anyone's got any questions, please do pop those in the comments. I've also posted the link to the guide. Lauren's got a free guide, and she can tell you a bit more about that, actually, if anyone's got any questions about it. I put a link again in the description and also in the comments in case someone commented saying that the link wasn't working for them. I'll add it to the email as well. If anyone's on our email list, when I email around with the link to the replay, I'll add the link there as well in case anyone's had any issues finding that. But yeah, I've just put the link in the comments somewhere around the video. Cool. Any questions then? We've got a comment here from Jiski. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time. Very interesting webinar. Have a super duper day.
Thank you for coming.
Another comment from English Queen. Absolutely brilliant content. Thank you for your time.
Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, everyone. Really great to hear. Just while waiting for anyone who's got any quick comments, any questions, to pop those in the comments. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about your free guide, perhaps, and how people can sign up to your email list and learn more from you as well?
Absolutely, yeah. So the guide is called 3 Steps to Standing Out as a Language Teacher, and it basically takes you through 3 sections. It's kind of like a workbook. So section 1 is identifying your niche. So if you haven't already identified your niche, there's just a couple of questions in there to get you thinking. If you have, then that's fine. You can move on to the next part where we start to look at what your niche is struggling with, how you're able to solve their problems. And then we lead into understanding the problems in a bit more detail, creating a statement that clearly says that, like, I'm the person to help. So I help this type of person achieve this type of thing. And then eventually you talk about the kind of surface level basics of building a brand voice. So things that you need to think about, like defining some adjectives and then starting to think about how you want your brand to sound, with a few examples in there as well.
Sounds super, super helpful. So thank you so much for that. Again, the link to that guide is in the description of the video, and I've also popped it in the comments as well. I think, is this the correct link on? Does it look like the right link?
I'm going to have to double check that, but I think I'm in the Facebook group, so I will. Oh yeah, or I'll send it over to
If
you.
anyone wants the guide and you can't find the link or it's not working for you, just say in the comments, please send me the guide right now, and we'll definitely respond back to you directly with the link. And I'll update it if there was a mistake on the link. I'll update it. It worked fine for me the other day when I checked, but no worries.
No, I don't know. I've been having some
reminders. Tech is a pain. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not my thing.
That's cool. I'm sure we'll get the link to the guide to everyone later if it didn't work for you.
Yeah.
Although I think someone earlier did mention something about the guide being useful, so I think they did manage to get it.
Yeah,
so maybe check the right thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Got a question here from Stephanie. What's the best way to focus on SEO in your writing? Good question.
So I would. Are we talking about the writing specifically, or kind of broader picture with keywords and research?
I'm guessing this is about, say, like writing a blog post or something, and how. I'm not too sure. How is maybe somebody who's just starting out writing blog posts? How would you think about SEO when you're writing the blog post?
Okay, sure. So before thinking, I think it's quite easy to think, oh, I've got a great idea, I'll write a blog post about that. But before you go ahead and do that, I would suggest taking a look, typing that search term into Google, seeing what already exists, and then also using a keyword tool. So there are a few free ones. There's one called WordStream, and also Google Ads Manager. You can search for keywords and get search volumes in there. And then that should give you an indication of whether or not it's a keyword that's worth focusing on. So once you've found a keyword that is relevant, I would go back to Google, have a look again at what's already there, and then see if you are adding anything new to that area. So Google is getting smarter and smarter. So it's really looking to serve the best quality content that answers the users' questions as clearly as possible. So if you feel like the blog posts there are already relevant enough, they cover everything, and you can't really add anything new to it, then I would either take a different angle or find a different topic. That actually happened to me yesterday. I was looking at writing a blog post for a client, and I had an idea, had the keyword, and then I saw that all the blog posts there kind of said everything. So it wasn't really worth us focusing on that and investing that time into creating a new blog post that may or may not show up because the other content is really good. So if you can add something new or come at the topic from a different angle, then it's worth it. But otherwise, yeah, I would go back and find a keyword that's perhaps not as saturated, especially if you are just starting out with blogging. If you don't already have a really strong website domain, which is the case for most of us when we're just independent business owners at the start, at least, try to focus on keywords that aren't already saturated by the big brands. So you'll find that like Fluent U, Pimsleur, and all these big companies they'll dominate the search rankings on certain search terms. So if you can find ones that are a bit more niche to your audience and that don't already have loads of content there, then you'll be able to rank quicker. And then when it comes to actually writing your content, you'll want to plan it around the search term. So look at when you type in it on Google, you get some search results, and then there's some other questions with drop-down links. So if you look at those and you try to answer those questions in your content, that can be a super powerful, super effective way of pleasing Google and getting ranked quicker, because you're answering all these other relevant search terms. So I would base your content, your blog plan around those questions and see what you can answer naturally. And then when you're writing the keywords, try to make it as natural as possible. You want to mention them, but you don't need to mention them exactly in the same way, like 10 times throughout the post. Google's smart enough now to know if you're doing what's called keyword stuffing, like just writing them for the sake of it. But it's also smart enough to know that if your keyword is learn English online, that's saying using apps to learn English, it's a related term. So it's smart enough to know that if you're using these terms that relate to the topic, but not that one specific keyword multiple times, that it's still a relevant post.
It's really great that you mentioned about the questions and stuff, that because Google has those commonly asked questions on certain topics, and sometimes people type in a question into Google instead of like a keyword.
Yeah,
so that's a really good point in terms of writing posts that kind of answer those sort of questions, or including it in, I guess, headings within your blog post or something. No, I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah, exactly. Headings, it's an important place to include keywords. So if you can include some of them there, then that's good.
Absolutely. Great. We've got a similar question also from Stephanie. Thanks so much. Blog posts, yes, and also on captions or extra info on social media. Does this include hashtags? What do you think about keywords and hashtags?
So hashtags, I'm not going to lie, I'm quite lazy with them. And I'd seen some conflicting information. So when I started my business, it was all hashtags are great. So I'd use them. And then there was a period where people said they weren't that useful. But I think recently it's changed so that they are more like keywords now. So what I've had, the most recent advice I've had is to use a maximum of around 5 hashtags on a post and just vary them. So you may have some that are specific to what you do. So using myself as an example, I might have education copywriter, but then I might also have language teacher. So although I'm not a language teacher, this would then show up for my target audience. So use a mixture and then try to use hashtags that don't already have millions of posts, because the chances of you being able to show up on there are a lot slimmer. So focus on keywords that have, I'd say, more than 100 posts or followers, but they're not completely saturated. And then the extra info, what did you mean by that?
Captures extra info on social media. I think that's, like if you make a post, you can have the title of the post. On some social media platforms, you can have a title of the post and then the content of the post and then the hashtags you might stick at the end. So I'm guessing the description bit. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Stephanie. Yeah. So do we want keywords in the post content, I think, basically, rather than just hashtags?
I think it depends on which platform you're using. I know on Instagram, keywords are becoming a thing, but I think that might be mainly with hashtags. I don't think the captions matter too much because most of your content will be served to the people that are following you. LinkedIn, I think hashtags are the way to go as well if you want to be showing up for certain search terms. But those are the only platforms I'm familiar with, really.
I'll take my own experience with the Chinese platforms. Obviously, this is different if you're targeting non-Chinese platforms. Yeah. But one of the main platforms that a lot of teachers use is Xiaohongshu, which is known as Little Red Book. And on there, it's kind of the opposite. They want lots of keywords, and they basically want you to write a whole blog post as a description of the post content. We said about how Chinese consumers tend to really like lots of detail and lots of text, you're saying earlier. And I was like, oh, wow, that actually links up to what some of the social media platforms in China are looking for. They don't want just a short caption. They want like a whole keyword packed description to the post. And actually they've reduced the focus on hashtags, I think, because there's too many people adding like 100 hashtags to their posts. And they're focusing more on almost normal SEO strategies that you do well on Xiaohongshu, like adding the words escaping me, adding the keywords like in the actual content itself of the post.
Oh wow, that's really interesting.
So yeah, difference between different platforms basically is the answer, I think, to this question.
Yes, I think in terms of the international platforms, you don't actually have to worry too much about that, at least not to that extent.
Yeah, so each platform's different. That's really useful to hear. Cool. I like that point about having, like, say, 5 hashtags, like focus on a few key ones. Because I've heard rumors that if you put too many in, the algorithm actually like cuts you off and reduces your reach. I don't know how true that is.
I've heard that too.
Yeah.
I don't know. They changed so quickly. I kind of gave up on keeping up.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you from Stephanie. Excellent. Thanks for the question. Okay, we've got a question here from Pedro. Pedro saying, I'm back. Like we discussed already. Well, great to have you join us again, Pedro. If I can't, I'll find out in the replay. If not, what kind of services can Lauren provide us with her paid services? So this might be a good opportunity for you to talk a little bit about people get in touch with you. How can you help teachers out?
Yeah, of course. So I offer 3 types of services at the moment. The first is copywriting services. So those are basically projects. So say, for example, if you decided that you want a website copywriting package would be one of them. So I'd work with you to understand your target audience, do some research, optimize it for SEO, and then write copy that sounds like you, basically. I've been told that's quite creepy. That's the result of research. I basically, take on board everything, the kind of brand image that you want to convey, and then write it in your tone of voice. There's websites, sales pages, email sequences. So sales sequences or like one-time kind of things rather than regular newsletters. And then I also offer content writing packages. So that would be if you wanted help with writing your newsletter or your blog. I do those on a monthly basis with basically 3-month contracts. So we'd work together for a period of 3 months to plan your content, create your content, and kind of analyze it as we go as well. And same there, that all of them include kind of audience research and understanding your industry. And then the last one is kind of a done with you service. So those ones are both, I would write your content and copy. But this last one is a power hour. So if you've already got copy, or you want some like one-to-one help, support, kind of getting your brand voice finalized and things like that, we could work together. We do an hour-long face-to-face call where we talk about whether it's your copy or kind of preparing your brand voice. And then I offer 10 days of support after that, where I can help edit the copy so it's ready for you to publish.
Fantastic. That's a lot of great things that you're offering there for teachers. So if anyone wants to check out those, the link is in the description of the video, which is either above or below the video, depending on where you're watching it. And also you can see on the screen here, copywriting.co.uk.
Yes, yeah, I will say that my website's having an issue at the moment, so it will be back up soon. But if you have any questions or anything, you can just reach out. I'm active on Instagram as well, so you can find me over there in the meantime.
Fantastic, great. And also just a reminder as well, the link is somewhere around the video for joining Lauren's email list, and you get a free guide as part of that. And then you can also email, I'm sure, with questions and things as well. Great. I think we've covered all the questions actually. So thank you everyone for all those great questions. Let me just go back to actually looking at our faces. I feel like now we can see each other. So I feel like that's most of the questions from everyone. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you so much, Lauren, for all this amazing advice and tips for teachers. Do you have anything you want to say kind of to finish up, Lauren?
Yeah, I will say that I know that I tend to give a lot of information in my presentations. So if you do have any questions, you feel a bit overwhelmed, feel free to reach out. I'm here, on Instagram, via email. And just know that if you're now rereading your copy and thinking, oh my God, I haven't done any of this, it's fine. Absolutely fine. Just take things, watch the replay, take little bits of advice and implement them as you go, and you'll find that it starts to become natural. It's not as overwhelming as it sounds. I think a lot of people feel that they need to have super writing skills to be able to write copy, but that's not necessarily the case. You can learn this as you go, and it is a really important skill to hone as you build your teaching business.
Fantastic. And it's great confidence boost hopefully to everyone as well. Like, we're all learning and we're all developing these skills, and experts like Lauren are here to help give you that guidance and help you writing these things as well if you need extra assistance. So I think that's everything. So thank you so much. Just a reminder, all the links are in the description if anyone wants to check all those things out we've mentioned, and that free guide, and contacting Lauren about her services. So yeah, I think we'll end here. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Lauren, for the great, really great tips and advice. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. So I think we'll end the broadcast here. Feel free to stick around for a moment, Lauren, and I'm just going to end the live stream. Yeah. So thanks, everyone, and see you again in the next live stream or webinar when I get around to organising another one, probably in another couple of weeks. So thank you, everyone, for joining us.